Number 10. Marlon and LaShonda Moore. Texas couple Marlon and LaShonda Moore rose to influencer status in the years leading up to the COVID-19 pandemic, depicting themselves as role models who'd achieved success purely through hard work. When the pandemic shut the world down in 2020, it complicated their ability to make money, which depended largely on socializing and networking at in-person events. In August of that year, the Moores parlayed their internet fame into a new money-making opportunity, Blessings in No Time, or BINT, an investment program that they promoted as safe, legal, and lucrative. In what the couple marketed as a pathway to prosperity for the black community, they promised an 800% return for each $1,400 investment. They also offered the ability for unsatisfied clients to back out at any time and get a full refund. During a period when countless Americans were struggling to make ends meet, it seemed like a no-brainer to take advantage of the offer. Many of BINT's early members received their promised returns, which convinced their family and friends to get in on the action. But it wasn't long before some investors failed to see their payouts. In the meantime, BINT's promotion system, which was based on recruiting new members, became increasingly complicated and difficult to understand. This was no mistake, according to investigators, who alleged that BINT was an illegal pyramid scheme. While more and more people demanded refunds, the Moores continued showing off their most recent purchases and excursions on social media. To many, it wasn't hard to see where their money was going, and they took it as a red flag to cash out immediately. At first, the couple urged frustrated investors to be patient and to recruit more members in order to receive their promised funds. But like any pyramid scheme, the operation crumbled under its own weight, and the Moores eventually admitted that they couldn't afford to pay everyone. They still urged people to stay on board, wait longer, and recruit new members, but at some point, the gig was up. Many people never received their payouts, and in some cases were left in financial peril, with other investors losing as much as $62,000 of their hard-earned money. The Moores' assets were frozen in 2021, and they're currently facing lawsuits from the Federal Trade Commission and the state of Texas. They're accused of bilking BINT members out of millions of dollars and claiming in court that they're now destitute. Sadly, many clients may never get their money back, even with a court victory. At the very least, chasing after it will most likely be a years-long uphill battle. Number 9. Tom Girardi. Tom Girardi made a name for himself as a big-shot attorney back in 1970 when he became the first lawyer in California to win a more than $1 million judgment in a medical malpractice case. He went on to represent clients in numerous major cases, including a lawsuit against Pacific Gas and Electric that won a $460 million settlement for water contamination victims and inspired the movie Erin Brockovich. Girardi's fame and fortune grew with each prolific courtroom victory, and at some point his success seems to have gone to his head. He shamelessly flaunted his wealth in the form of lavish vacations, exotic cars, private jets, and expensive jewelry and gifts for the women in his life, and used it to socialize with powerful politicians. By 2020, Girardi's spending had become out of control, and many of the clients he'd represented over the last decade began to complain about not receiving the settlements they'd won in court. They became sickened and angry as they watched Girardi and his much younger wife, Erica, show off their exorbitant lifestyle on the reality series The Real Housewives of Beverly Hills. Until then, the obnoxious attorney had avoided disciplinary measures from past allegations of wrongdoing. This time around, authorities investigated. They found evidence that Girardi had misused settlement funds that were supposed to go to his clients, including $3 million that was meant for surviving widows and orphans of plane crash victims. Some people never saw a single penny of their award or agreed to settle out for a mere portion of what they were expecting because they really needed the money and it was better than nothing. Meanwhile, Girardi funneled the money to his personal accounts and used it to maintain his wanton spending habits and to pay bills and expenses for his law firm. He was disbarred in 2022 and was subsequently indicted by federal grand juries in California and Illinois on a laundry list of fraud charges for allegedly swindling $18 million from his victims. The 83-year-old now claims to be broke after squandering an 8-figure sum of money that wasn't even his to begin with. If convicted, Girardi could face decades in prison, which would effectively amount to the rest of his life. But the future of the case remains uncertain due to Girardi's Alzheimer's diagnosis, which poses questions about his competency to stand trial. For now, he's living in a memory care facility while his brother acts as his court-appointed conservator over what little money he has left. Number 8. John Fox. It was impossible not to notice when John Fox was driving around Berkeley, California, in one of the luxury cars from his ever-growing collection, which included a Maserati, several Corvettes, Ferraris, and more. He bought the vehicles with the multi-million-dollar fortune he made as the owner of a fine wine store and warehouse called Premier Cru. Fox opened his first store in 1980. A large portion of his business revenue came from pre-arrival customers who paid for their order weeks, months, or even years ahead of time in exchange for what seemed like unbeatable prices. At some point, Fox began selling phantom wine, a product that he had no plans to actually order. He kept what he was doing a secret from his employees and created fake invoices to make it appear as though his purchases matched up with what customers thought they were buying from the company. Every year, Fox increased the amount of phantom wine he sold, while also continuing to do honest business. By the time Fox fell under investigation in 2015, the scam had been running for at least 5 years, and he'd scammed customers out of somewhere between $20 and $45 million. He'd helped himself to a generous portion of the money, which he blew on his cars, homes, golf club memberships, and dates with women he met online. Fox also used a lot of the money coming in from new customers to satisfy past orders. Around the same time, his personal life began to fall apart. 2 years earlier, Fox's conspicuous displays of wealth had landed him a date with a serial extortionist named Saul Murray, who demanded $240,000 and threatened to tell his wife they slept together if he didn't pay up. And so he paid her $10,000 per month in order to stay quiet. Federal authorities arrested Fox for running a suspected Ponzi scheme. Premier Cru went bankrupt, and most of the furnishings and inventory, some of which Fox had paid shockingly high prices for, sold for pennies on the dollar at auction. As part of a plea deal, he helped the FBI catch Saul Murray, who had victimized other rich men, and he admitted to a single count of wire fraud. He served 4.5 years in prison and was released in 2016, but he's not off the hook for his crimes. Fox agreed to pay $45 million in restitution to 9,000 former customers. He's now in his 70s, but it likely won't earn him much sympathy or spare him from getting shaken down by the feds at the slightest hint of him running into money. Number 7. Eleanora in Cardona. Milan-based Italian Instagram influencer Eleanora in Cardona documents essentially every aspect of her life on social media, making it easy for complete strangers to know where she's at almost any given time. With nearly 500,000 followers, she makes her living entirely from her internet presence. But the ease of tracing the 31-year-old's steps and her daily displays of the finer things in life made her an easy target for a group of thieves one day in early 2021. The suspects dressed inconspicuously for Milan's high fashion scene and waited for in Cardona to leave her apartment. They watched as she stepped outside with her dog, stopped to make a video letting her fans know what she was up to, and continued on her way to a Tiffany's jewelry store, where she uploaded more social media content. While she was gone, the burglars entered her apartment and emptied it of valuables, including in Cardona's clothing, bags, and shoes. She would later learn that she was targeted by an organized group of criminals who handpicked their victims by searching for social media users who appeared to be wealthy in their photos. By then, police were already onto the suspects, who'd also recently targeted a TV host named Diletta Leotta and other well-to-do Milanese residents. Law enforcement arrested the men outside in Cardona's home. Authorities said the young thieves are both skilled and difficult to identify as criminals. They're young, fit, attractive, and fashionable, and they're also apparently really good at climbing walls with what police described as circus-like skill. Prosecutor Francesca Krupi, who calls the suspects their acrobat thieves, cited the case as an example of why people should be careful not to overshare online. While this was the first case in the region of a group of burglars to habitually use social media to select their victims, it likely won't be the last time something like this happens, especially now that the sophisticated group's methods have been described in news articles all over the world. In the end, the moral of the story is, flaunt your wealth at your own risk. Number 6. Tony Harris. In 2015, 50-year-old electronics repairman Tony Harris snapped a photo of his fiancée, 27-year-old Amber Crane, holding multiple stacks of $20 bills. He posted it on Facebook along with a humorous caption stating, "I misplaced $60,000. I hope my wife didn't go shopping with it." A week later, 3 armed intruders entered the couple's home in Philadelphia's Kings Essing neighborhood and demanded the money. Crane insisted the family didn't have any cash, but the suspects didn't seem to believe her. They then forced Harris and Crane into separate rooms at gunpoint while repeatedly ordering them to hand over the cash. The burglar holding Crane hostage overheard Harris fighting back against the other 2 suspects and went into the other room to investigate. He shot Harris in the head at point-blank range as 2 of the victim's 3 children looked on, and afterwards the perpetrators fled the scene. Harris died from his injuries at a nearby hospital. Crane survived, and thankfully the children weren't harmed either. The recent Facebook post of Crane posing with fat wads of cash naturally led to the suspicion that the killers saw the photo and targeted the household, thinking they would make off like fat cats. But they didn't seem to get away with much because the family apparently wasn't nearly as well off as the post made them seem. After the murder, Crane and the kids left the house and went to stay elsewhere. Just days later, someone smashed the padlock securing the front door and ransacked the home, making off with video game consoles, TVs, laptops, and some new children's clothing. Unfortunately, Harris's murder and the subsequent burglary remain unsolved to this day. Number 5. Christopher Robinson. 23-year-old Christopher Robinson was behind on his child support payments in 2013 when he posted photos of himself with large amounts of cash and expensive bottles of liquor on Facebook. In fact, the Milwaukee resident had never made a single $150 monthly payment since the child's birth more than 2 years earlier, according to police. The photos gave law enforcement enough evidence to apply for a search warrant, and Facebook was court-ordered to give investigators full access to Robinson's account. Based on the evidence they found, the alleged deadbeat dad was charged with 3 felony counts relating to his failure to pay support. Milwaukee County Chief Deputy District Attorney Kent Lovin told ABC News that he couldn't discuss specifics about the case, but he described Facebook as a useful tool for identifying someone who's been misleading about their lifestyle. In Robinson's case, he definitely had the means to make his child support payments, but was refusing not to. The photos didn't prove that it was his money, but they enabled detectives to dig deeper with their investigation. Robinson reportedly failed to appear in court after being served with a warrant, and it's unclear what became of the case. Number 4. Richard Catalano. Just hours after 26-year-old Richard Catalano posted a photo of large piles of cash on Facebook in 2014, an armed intruder pried open the back door of his home in North Providence, Rhode Island, and confronted him in his bedroom. The burglar, later identified as 24-year-old Dari Garcia, demanded money and then fatally shot Catalano, while the victim's girlfriend hid behind the couple's bed with their puppies. Upon hearing the gunshot, Catalano's mother, Lori, rushed into his room and came face to face with Garcia, who shot her in the shoulder. Catalano's stepfather, Christopher Tabalillo, tried to tackle the suspect but was repeatedly pistol-whipped in the head. Lori tried to intervene, but Garcia bit off the tip of her finger and shot her in the face. She ran to a neighbor's house for help while Garcia attempted to flee as well, only to get outside and realize that his getaway driver had already sped off. So he went back inside and shot himself in the face. Both he and Lori were rushed to the hospital when emergency responders arrived, and surprisingly, they survived. Garcia had a lengthy criminal record that included past convictions for violent crimes. Earlier that year, a police officer shot him after he attacked his mother. His violent tendencies, coupled with Catalano's Facebook post showing off what appeared to be thousands of dollars, were apparently a perfect recipe for disaster, although it's unclear whether the photo inspired the deadly intrusion. Speaking with local station WJAR shortly after the murder, Catalano's father, Richard Lopez, questioned why Garcia wasn't already locked up for his past crimes, which would have perhaps saved his son's life. Garcia was convicted on over a dozen counts, including murder, burglary, assault with a dangerous weapon, felony assault, and several gun-related charges. In the end, he was sentenced to 2 consecutive life terms, plus 125 years. Number 3. Saul Murray. In early 2022, 33-year-old Saul Murray posted photos of himself wearing Rolex watches on Instagram. Just weeks later, a neighbor entered his apartment building after working the night shift and found him lying naked in a pool of blood. Someone had stabbed him in the leg, severing his femoral artery and causing him to fatally bleed out. 2 women, later identified as 35-year-old Sir Preet Dillon and 21-year-old Temadayo Orr, were seen leaving the building on surveillance footage. They were followed by 29-year-old Cleon Brown and 31-year-old Ikram Afia, who appeared to have a large knife in his hand. Investigators uncovered further evidence that the 4 suspects co-conspired to rob Murray over a several-week period leading up to the crime. According to prosecutors, Sir Preet Dillon reached out to Murray shortly after he posted the Rolex photos. The women were accused of using their sex appeal to gain entry into the victim's home, where they slipped GHB, a sedative, into his wine to knock him out. Swabs from both sides of the victim's face contained Sir Preet and Temadayo's DNA, indicating that they seduced him as part of their plan to make off with his valuables. All 4 suspects were convicted of conspiring to rob Murray. Afia was found guilty of murder and possession of the knife that was used to kill the victim and was sentenced to life in prison with a minimum of 25 years. The other 3 suspects were convicted of manslaughter and received prison sentences ranging from 7 to 10 years. Number 2. Tracy Sho Hutsona. In 2015, Tracy Sho Hutsona applied for a job as the assistant manager of Jumana Kidd, the ex-wife of former NBA star Jason Kidd. She seemed like the perfect fit for the position, overqualified even. Tracy owned a seemingly successful luxury concierge firm that catered to the rich and famous. Jumana needed the help and was happy to give her the job. In addition to owning the concierge firm Elite Lux Life, Tracy ran a YouTube channel called Homeless Millionaires, where she and her husband Daryl showed off luxury cars, chartered jets, and lavish outings, things they claimed were perks of their concierge work. In one episode of her show, Tracy said, "We're living like millionaires, we're living like our billionaire clients, but we're working." However, the only thing she was working to do was steal her clients' identities and money. When Jumana's financial team cautioned her against overspending, she realized that more than $300,000 had disappeared from her accounts. She confronted Tracy, who tearfully admitted to opening a credit card in Jumana's name and promised to pay the money back. Jumana forgave her and they agreed to a payment plan, which Tracy kept up with faithfully. What Jumana didn't realize was that Tracy had figured out more clever and hidden ways to continue stealing her money. Tracy somehow accessed her employer's laptop, filtered Jumana's financial notifications into spam, and made herself the primary holder on several of Jumana's accounts. She siphoned more than $1 million, including cash from her boss's children's college savings funds, and caused Jumana's credit score to drop into the 400s. The second time Jumana realized Tracy was stealing from her, she cut all ties and went to law enforcement. Thanks to Tracy's penchant for showing off her lifestyle on social media, investigators didn't have to look hard to see where all the money had gone. She'd spent it on jewelry, phones, nightclubs, luxury hotels, restaurants, and other things she had no business buying with someone else's money. Tracy was finally arrested in 2021. She pleaded guilty to wire fraud in 2022 and was sentenced to 51 months in federal prison the following year, which means she'll see freedom again in a little over 4 years. It won't be her first prison stint, and it likely won't be her last either. Number 1. Taylor Goldblatt. 24-year-old Taylor Goldblatt was trying to brand himself as an influencer on YouTube back in 2014 and managed to gain a modest following of around 1,400 subscribers with his videos, which often involved showing off cash and designer items. Police believed that this made him the target of a robbery one morning in 2014. Goldblatt was asleep in his apartment on Manhattan's Upper East Side when a pair of intruders scaled the fire escape and entered through an open window. The suspects woke Goldblatt up and threatened him at knife point while they looted his apartment for valuables, taking clothing, sneakers, designer bags, and other items. Luckily, the thieves didn't hurt Goldblatt. They were seen exiting the building with large bags on surveillance footage that was captured after the robbery. Police estimated the total amount of goods stolen at $20,000, but Goldblatt insisted the value was closer to $50,000. The security video was released to the public in hopes that someone might be able to help identify the suspects, but there have been no updates on the case since the story broke, indicating that the burglars likely got away with their crime. Would you rather get stuck paying for an expensive meal after your wealthy date slipped out of the restaurant to avoid the bill, or sit through a frustratingly awkward date with someone who's too busy posting photos of themselves on social media to pay much attention to the conversation? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, hit that subscribe button. Thanks so much for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye.